Thank you for listening to my presentation on meeting career support challenges of our international students. I have to begin my presentation with a little bit of a caveat, and that is that when I started this project, I was really amazed at how little information existed about this particular topic. There was a lot of other topics regarding international students studying in the U.S., but there was really very few peer-reviewed articles on career support. I was amazed at this because of the record number of students currently studying in the U.S., and it seems to be a trend that will continue to be on the rise for the future. So given that, I saw that many of the current literature that did exist on the topic didn't use culturally relevant instrumentation to measure results. In fact, Crockett and Hayes referenced this in their analysis of all the peer-reviewed articles that exist on this topic. They basically said that, many of them used current or modified instrumentation for measurement when this unique issue really requires its own instrumentation. So the reason I mention this is because I feel that for true policy change on the institutional or government level, more valid research needs to emerge on additional variabilities. However, as a result of my analysis of all the articles that I did review, I was able to see certain themes that continually emerged, and those are the themes that I'm going to go over today. And I'm also going to go over, or rather offer my insight into the impact of those themes from an institutional point of view, as well as look at the bigger picture in terms of the results for institutions upon implementing some of the best practices. So let's go ahead and begin. So by definition, an international student is someone who is not a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident and is studying here in the U.S. According to the WallStreetJournal.com, the U.S. served as a host to a record number of international students for the 2012-2013 academic year. So there was a total of 819,644 students here during that year. And this was documented as a 7.2% increase from the year before. So international student populations have steadily been on the rise as these students continue to flock to the U.S. in pursuit of academic and career aspirations. According to Spencer Rogers' 1998 study on an assessment of the career development needs of international students, surfacing this population in our higher education institutions can sometimes pose a challenge for faculty, career counselors, and student affairs, as their needs, and in particular career needs, differ from that of domestic students. One emerging concern about utilizing career support services for international students is that it currently caters to the American student and doesn't address concerns specific to the international student population. With so many international students in our undergraduate and graduate programs, the question we have to ask ourselves is, are we servicing the needs of this unique student population, and why does that matter? I feel it matters in four important ways. The first is that many of these students pay out of their own or their families' pockets to finance their education. In fact, according to the Institute of International Education, the U.S. Department of Commerce describes U.S. higher education as the country's fifth largest service sector export. So clearly, these students are an important source of revenue for our colleges and universities. The second is that they globalize and enrich the learning experience of our domestic students. According to Andrea C. Trice, in her article, Navigating in a Multinational Learning Community, quote, international students help globalize the learning community by interjecting their varied perspectives and experiences into discussions that take place both inside and outside the classroom. In this way, they benefit our domestic students, are an essential component of an emerging and culturally diverse multinational environment, and this is similar to conditions that our students will face in the 21st century working environment. The third reason is that certain employers are demanding preparation in select fields. Also in Trice's research, she identified specific departments in her study. One of those departments was architecture. The architecture department actively recruited students who had international experience to their graduate programs. And the reason why is because the architecture profession is so global. Individuals who have worked on international projects and have experience beyond U.S. borders are actually sought after. So employers in professions that demand international focus and preparation will continue to encourage schools to internationalize. The fourth reason is it's simply the right thing to do. Our institutions of higher education are committed to serving each and every one of our students to the best of our ability. It's often an institutional mission and objective. If there's a deficiency in the system, it's our duty to explore the issue and come up with improvements. Let's go over the main concerns of a domestic career support system by going over the main challenges many international students face when first arriving into the U.S. The first and primary concern is having a language barrier, not being as strong or fluent in their English-speaking skills, so that was a top concern among students. And according to research by Spencer and Rogers, her 1998 study, this is usually coupled with their unfamiliarity with cultural norms that are present in their host country. For example, it takes them some time to assimilate and learn to navigate their surroundings from a language and a cultural perspective. So along with their educational challenges, they're also adapting to and changing to new surroundings. That's a specific challenge to international students that many domestic students don't necessarily have to face in the same degree. Second concern was INS rules and regulations. Immigration and Naturalization Services impose certain restrictions around work. These policies can be complicated, difficult to understand. Many students are concerned about violating their visa requirements. Again, according to Spencer and Rogers' 1998 study, this can be in direct contradiction with international students' needs, as many students require a certain level of part-time and full-time employment. So they either require that for the pay, because as previously described, they're usually paying out of their own pockets. They need it for the practical experience working in the U.S., or they need it for both. So a third concern was navigating the employment sector in terms of knowing where to look for work. Spencer and Rogers' 2000 quantitative study indicated that many students were unaware of where to look for job opportunities, and they were unfamiliar with things like internet searches, as well as the concept of networking. Because of some of their cultural barriers, many would need to be properly prepared by counselors for things like employer interviews. Students reported that marketing oneself openly, as well as direct eye contact, being assertive, were sometimes considered rude in their native countries and not really practiced. A good example of this is according to Sangnaevich, Lenz, and Cavoso's 2011 article on international students' employment search in the U.S. In many Asian cultures, it's considered polite to bow when meeting a potential employer as a sign of respect, similar to shaking hands in the U.S. Boasting about oneself is considered rude in many Asian cultures. In the U.S., it's just considered self-promotion. So when engaging in many of these U.S. customs, many students clearly felt uncomfortable and didn't feel like the process was organic for them. So because of all these factors, it's not surprising that all of the factors combined put international students on the perception of being disadvantaged in the job process. And off the bat, make them at least feel less competitive with their American counterparts. Last but not least, in a study by Yijin Shen and Edwin L. Herr called Career Placement Concerns of International Graduate Students, a graduate student top concern was that career counselors didn't cater to their level of specification with their respective industries. Their impression of counselors were that they were more geared toward undergraduate populations with their career fairs and other events. Many students at the graduate level didn't utilize the service because of this perception that they wouldn't be able to help. So instead, they found career support in their faculty, in their academic departments, and in their student organizations. So they often turn to these sources as alternative means because they seem to produce more results. All the studies seem to point to two emerging themes when it comes to counselor challenges and servicing this population. The first is on the career development side. As seen on the previous slide, and again indicated by research by Shen and Her, if students are unaware of the service or under negative misconceptions about whether or not counselors will be able to help them, they simply won't use it. Also, according to Crockett and Hayes' 2011 study, many students had negative stigmas attached to using counseling services, as it was considered a weakness in their cultures to ask for help. So even if they went on and used the service, their career plans are in constant flux, depending upon if they stay in the US or if they return home to their home countries. And there are many different reasons for whether or not they would make one decision or another, but both are really challenging scenarios requiring very different career development plans. Some of the reasons for unpredictability, if we look at some of those, it lies in, again, Shen and Her's research, which says that international students have a collectivism versus an individualism attitude, which exists primarily here in the US. A good example of this is research by Singarvelu, White, and Bringays. Their 2005 article, Factors Influencing Students' Career Choice, indicates that groups such as Asians as well as non-Asians had a high familial influence, particularly from fathers as opposed to domestic students. Sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's home countries that are sponsoring students financially. So students feel an obligation to go back to those countries after their degree programs. And sometimes it is individual factors that come into play that help them make that decision. In a quantitative study by Musamba, Jin, and Majeld, their study, which was Factors Influencing Career Location Preference of International Graduate Students in the U.S., this indicated that students actually preferred to start their careers in the country with better public safety, more career opportunities, cleaner water, and a better standard of living. So to me, those are very basic needs that may not exist in native countries. So whatever the reason in terms of staying or returning, a third challenge in career development is re-entry. Spencer and Rogers' 2000 quantitative research study indicates that over 70% of students would like to stay in the U.S. after their program, so majority of students would like to stay, but practical reality indicates that even if students obtain some kind of temporary position, many will not be able to secure permanent residency and will have to return home to their native countries at some point. So a major challenge for counselors will be to obtain knowledge of country-specific job market information for a re-entry strategy. So, you know, that's going to be really difficult for them because it's going to be impossible for counselors at this time to know everything. But perhaps tools such as the internet could be a helpful resource for them to turn to. Another emerging theme in addition to career development is career placement of these students. This is a factor that is unfortunately one that the school can't entirely control. Employers are typically hesitant to hire international students in general, not in every field, but in general. And this is because of restrictive INS policies and procedures and the administrative hassles associated with the process. This becomes a catch-22 for the student because if they can't get hired permanently in the U.S. without the practical experience, and employers are reluctant or unable to take them on, and that's by research by Shen and Her, or according to research by Shen and Her. An avenue for some of these students may lie in obtaining a campus job, but according to Spencer and Rogers' 1998 study, international students feel that these campus jobs are scarce, far and few between, and the ones that are there, there's a lot of competition among American students for the same work. Another issue that counselors should look at in placement is actually themselves. And counselors should look at their own personal biases around servicing this population and really examine their own positionality to this. In order to service effectively, counselors are going to have to change their approach to include looking through a culturally relevant lens in order to meet some of these groups on a common level. Traditional one-on-one counseling that may work with domestic students may not work with international students. And according to Crockett and Hayes, counseling that assists the counselor in seeing through the international student's eyes, as well as their past experiences, may be a more effective tool. Now that we've talked about some of the challenges, I'd like to shift the focus onto some best practices as suggested by research. The first is targeted outreach in all forms, both print and online, and that was specifically in Shen and Her's 2004 article. This basically lets students know that what the function of the career office is, how they can help with some of the specific concerns that are unique to them. A reason for the mass marketing lies in the fact that we already know how overwhelmed these students are when they first arrive onto campus and start their studies. An impact of targeting them early on in their academic career exposes them to the service and keeps up the relationship throughout their program. It's also going to help them keep pace with their changing goals, and it will remind them of the office's support of them and the office's purpose. Job preparation workshops were found to also be a very useful resource for this group. According to Shen and Her, as well as Spencer Rogers, activities around preparing an American-style resume versus a CV, mock interviews to practice marketing skills, and job search techniques were on the top of the list for assistance items. These skills are integral for this population to master early on, and perhaps can be if they master them early on, they can practice them throughout their time in school. Because of the importance, maybe they should be part of their orientation process at the particular institutions. They seem simple in nature, but because of their unfamiliarity with these students, can pose a serious disadvantage if the students are unaware of them. Even if the students turn to other departments and faculty for career opportunities, it should all be coordinated through the central office, and maybe the career office is the one to focus the effort. With a centralized office, you can focus on internship opportunities. You can make sure that the student is focusing on also on-campus and scholarly activities, because those can also enhance a student's resume and should be encouraged, according to Shen and Her. The close collaboration is essential in maximizing the student's job experience, and more can be accomplished through coordinated effort across departments for the student versus individual effort. Also, Crockett and Hayes recommends that instead of students going to different offices to receive help, such as maybe the Multicultural Office, International Student Advising Office, Career Placement and Services Office, maybe career advisors could coordinate with different offices to provide a one-stop shop. And if this can't be done on a permanent basis, maybe advisors could coordinate the effort once a month. International alumni support is really important. And it's actually critical to expanding access to employment. Counselors should be collaborating with alumni relations in tracking information on international students that are currently working within the country and their job specifics. This could be a way into the job market for the student, and at the very least, it may serve as an important mentor relationship for the student in their career path, and that's according to Shen and Her's 2004 article. International alumni that are working within the field can prove to be the student's best advocate for obtaining a position, as well as maybe enhance the school's reputation to potential employers. They should be invited to campus on a regular basis for things like networking opportunities. Also, more peer help could be an alternative to one-on-one counseling sessions because of the previously discussed negative stigmas involved. Counselors could choose to hold these sessions in collaboration with student organizations or the Multicultural Office that international students already frequent. So according to Segnayevich, Lenz, and Kavosos, group counseling and peer counseling could be maybe a change for the counselor, but a technique that may be more effective when working with these students. Last but not least, education around INS policies and procedures. It's confusing, and counselors will definitely prove to be a resource when it comes to explaining the administration involved and navigating the complicated system. And again, that's according to Shen and Her. Students are definitely confused when it comes to what they can and cannot do under the policies. They need to be educated. Counselors can serve as a guide in the process. If counselors don't know the information, they can again collaborate with other departments in obtaining the information. However, they need to be an expert in this field. If counselors don't know the specifics and the process, how can they effectively help students with their career goals? A student's career goal may be in direct conflict and may not even be feasible with current visa policy regulations regarding their stay. So counselors will definitely have to know what students can and cannot do during their time in the U.S. According to Spencer Rogers' 2000 article, counseling and career development strategy will take on a different approach based upon whether students plan on staying in the U.S. or returning home after their programs. So in my mind, determining this early on and tracking it throughout a student's academic program will enable the counselor to choose an appropriate job development strategy long term. I also believe that equally important is determining the student's level of acculturation. And Crockett and Hayes defines this as, quote, the process of adopting and assimilating cultural traits or social patterns of the dominant group. The level of acculturation has a parallel relationship to the amount of assistance a student may need on the job front. We know from Musambajin and Melged that the longer one stay in the U.S., the higher a student's acculturation becomes. So this leads me to believe that acculturation can change over time, from initially being low to high based upon one's length and stay. Determining that level can give counselors insight into the types of activities and assistance an individual may need. Last but not least, since global traits are valued in today's job market, counselors can help students accentuate these traits and highlight the advantages for employers both on their resume preparation as well as on interviews. When I reflect on the current research, I don't think implementing some of the best practices suggested will be easy for many institutions. With the record numbers of international students already studying in the U.S., many institutions are in reactive mode versus proactive mode. This is coupled with the fact that research is still emerging on the topic. Establishing major changes in protocols at schools can be received with mixed emotion by faculty, staff, and administrative personnel. For those institutions that feel that they can or they are in a position to implement best practices, the best practices can only be successful if the leadership of the institution or the department places emphasis on the change, and that in the institution's culture is flexible enough to accommodate the change. Lastly, the degree of change and support may require services above and beyond current offerings, international infrastructure, or counselor expertise. So maybe new departments would need to be established or current departments would need to be expanded. As stated by Yujin Shen and Edwil L. Herr in their article, Career Placement Concerns of International Graduate Students, quote, international graduate students endure high physical and emotional costs to pursue their ambitions and dreams through overseas study with the achievement of their own career aspirations as an ultimate goal. It's every institution's mission to serve all of their students to the best of their ability. The impact of applying these best practices goes beyond improving service to this academic population of students. By better preparing our international students in order to compete and eventually enter the American job market, we not only expand their opportunities, but we expand the reputation and opportunities for the higher education institution that we're servicing. By better preparing our students both culturally and technically, the institution's product, which is the graduate, improves, and employer anxiety and uncertainty around the hiring process lessens. There's not much we can do at this point about immigration policies, but with additional research, we can continue to analyze the impact of these students on our institutions as well as our economies and make decisions accordingly. Perhaps policy change on the federal or state level will change as more research enters the scene.